One of the biggest questions that Christians can grapple with is, are we still under the Old Testament law? Jesus says something if you listen or read the Sermon on the Mount. He actually says in Matthew 5:17, "Do not think that I have come to abolish the law of the prophets. I have not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them." But then the New Testament continues to say that we are under grace and not the law. So which is it? Did Jesus keep the law, or did he bring it to an end? Let's take a look in this video at what Jesus actually meant. Thank you for joining me, and if you haven't already, my name is Daniel and I run this channel, Faith Talks with Daniel. So if you like this video or my channel, please subscribe by hitting the subscribe button below. All right, let's get into it. So Jesus is talking about here in a early part of the Sermon on the Mount about the fulfillment of the law, that he is the fulfillment of the law. So the first point I want to look at is, what did Jesus actually mean by the law and the prophets? So he's talking about the entire Old Testament scriptures, of course. And this includes many things, including the most important, which is the law of Moses, or the Ten Commandments, the many writings of the prophets, both major and minor, and the actual entire story of the covenant that God made with the people of Israel. So Jesus wasn't just talking about the commandments, even though that is a small part of it. He's talking about the entire Old Testament revelation. And Jesus actually makes something very clear here. He didn't come to abolish it. Jesus was never rejecting the Old Testament. He was actually affirming it, and affirming it in such a big way that when we look further into the Sermon on the Mount, he actually expands upon it. So the second point I just want to look at is the word fulfill. The key word here is, what does fulfill mean? Because Jesus didn't come to destroy the law. He came to bring it to its intended end or completion. And if we think about it like this, that the Old Testament was always pointing to something or someone, and that one was Jesus Christ, because it contains over 300 prophecies and promises of the coming Messiah, which Jesus fulfilled every single one of them. All the sacrifices, symbols, and everything else all points to Jesus. Every single story and covenant and failure and the people that were heroes and villains in that book all pointed to Jesus, all pointed to Christ. So when Jesus says he came to fulfill the law, he means that the law will actually find its true meaning and completion in him. And if we look at that same verse again and expand on it, and it says, "Do not think that I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them. For truly I tell you, until heaven and earth disappear, not the smallest letter nor the least stroke of a pen will by any means disappear from the law until everything is accomplished. Therefore, anyone who set aside one of the least of these commands and teaches others accordingly will be called least in the kingdom of heaven. But whoever practices and teaches these commands will be called great in the kingdom of heaven." So Jesus here is saying that he was never coming to get rid of those laws, because all of these things point to him and his righteousness, and he completes all the things in the Old Testament that no one else could. So the third point is, are Christians still under the law in that case? Because this is where we need to think carefully, because believers are no longer under the Mosaic law or the covenant from the Ten Commandments, but we still need to work towards obeying them. Even though Paul says in Romans that we are not under the law, but under grace, because Christ fulfilled the law through his death, his resurrection. The sacrificial system that was in the Old Testament is no longer needed, because Jesus was the one who made the ultimate sacrifice. But the Ten Commandments and the law is still actually important for believers, for Christians today, because the law actually revealed God's character, his holiness, and his moral standard. And if you look at the Ten Commandments, it actually shows us, every single one of us, that we cannot attain perfection. We cannot attain that perfection. We will never meet that standard that has been set. We will break every single one of them at some point in our lives. But that's why Jesus was sent. That is why we have Jesus, because Jesus addresses the heart issue. And that's why I want to get on to the fourth point, which is Jesus actually expands upon the law. Because if you read the verses straight after this particular passage on the fulfillment of the law, Jesus actually expands on many things. He goes through a couple of things from the Ten Commandments themselves, and he goes further. And he continues with his, "You have heard it said, but I say to you." So, for example, you shall not murder. You shall not commit adultery. Those things, Jesus doesn't just fulfill them, he expands on them, and he expects believers to be holier and aim towards holiness. We will never attain perfection, but it's about becoming more Christ-like as we develop our relationship with him. Because he talks about murder, but he says that murder actually begins in the heart. It is our heart attitude, and it starts with anger and frustration and those types of things. And he's saying that at the worst of that can lead to murder, at the worst end of the spectrum. And it's the same with adultery. Adultery doesn't just start with sleeping with your neighbor. It starts with a lust in the heart. It starts with coveting someone else's wife. It's what happened to David. The reason why David broke every single one of the commandments was because he didn't just look at Bathsheba and look away. He lingered. His eyes lingered. And because of that, that led him into the final point of adultery, murder, and many other things. He also goes on in another one where he says revenge. You've heard it said that an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, but Jesus flips it and says, you need to love your enemies. You need to love your enemies, which is radical. Because Jesus wasn't actually just fulfilling the law. He was actually saying, this is where it's an issue of the heart. And the law just reveals the heart issues and puts them to light. And that's why he even expands on it, because we are to be set apart and different. That is what the whole point of being a Christian is. So what does this actually mean for Christians today? How can we as Christians just achieve this standard? Because it says, do not think that I've come to abolish the law or the prophets. I've come not to abolish them, but to fulfill them. So how does that apply to our lives today? How do we understand the law, the Mosaic law that was written 2,500 to 3,000 years ago? First of all, as I said, we need to understand that the law was there to reveal to us that we can never match that standard, and that salvation cannot be earned, because if it could be earned, Jesus died on the cross for nothing. That's why Christ died on the cross, to fulfill that law on our behalf. And we need to take the teaching of the scriptures seriously. Again, not to earn salvation, but so we can live in a way that reflects God's character to those around us, and to change the inward parts of us as well. The law is no longer there to condemn us, because we have grace. We are under grace. But the fruit of our salvation leads to us becoming more Christ-like. And the law is still there to instruct us in a way that we should be living. So to finish up, I just wanted to say, to just bring it back to that first point, Jesus did not abolish the law. He actually fulfilled it. And the Old Testament ultimately points to Jesus. And through Christ, we are saved, not by keeping that law, but by trusting in him for salvation. And once we trust in him for salvation, we will be transformed into a Christ-like and more godly way of living. So just wanted to share that. If that helped you in any way, if it helped you understand that particular passage in the Bible, let me know in the comments and have a discussion with me about it. And in the next video, we'll continue on this teaching and series from the Sermon on the Mount. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you on the next one. Cheers. Thank you so much for watching this video. If this video spoke to you, I would encourage you to hit that subscribe button on the YouTube channel, and also to like and comment on my videos to help this channel grow, where I continue to teach on biblical topics and things that I just find in my own personal study. And I hope you enjoy each and every one of these videos. Thank you so much.